Sex and the City is so feminist because it's really, I mean, it is in the book, and I think it is in the first 2 seasons, because it really is about, hey, you know what, society? We are single women in our 30s, and guess what? We're getting on with it. We've got our friends. We've made a different kind of family, and we are not pariahs. We are not freaks.
The Harbor Race excursion with
It's really saved my life.
I'm going to read a little bit from this new book, Is There Still Sex in the City? And this book is really, it's called fiction. It's really auto-fiction because there are a lot of autobiographical elements, things that really happened to me, like my dog died. My father did actually die while I was writing the book. I know this all sounds very depressing, but it's set in a fictional landscape, and the characters who are my friends are really an amalgamation of lots of different women. And so it's really about a journey that I took through my 50s that I never expected to go on. And it did start when I got divorced in my early 50s. And the reality is, I never thought, you know, when I was 50, I was like, I've got it all. You know, I've got a great career. I'm going great guns. I've been married for almost 10 years. You know, I'm super happy. And I think that, you know, everything's fine. And I did not think about the future at all. And then I found myself divorced. I kind of thought that maybe I was the only one. And the reality was that I was kind of like bitter about relationships. So I did spend a lot of time by myself, which was great and very, I think, soothing for me. And I just wrote a lot. And then a couple of my friends who were single moved out of the city. And they said, hey, why don't you come and live in the same place that we're living? So I thought, you know what, why not? This is what single women say to each other when they're young. What are we going to do when we get to be old? Hello, Golden Girls. We're all going to live together in the same house. In this case, we were going to live together in our shacky, unrenovated houses, but that was okay because we were all in the same town and we were going to be there for each other. So we would do things like we'd go to the green market and cook and you know, and it was like, oh, I'm like a housewife, you know, but I don't have a husband or kids. I'm a little Martha Stewart. And then, bang, about 10 of our girlfriends suddenly got divorced, and everything changed. First of all, they all wanted to come to the place we were because we were the only single women they knew. So they all came to this place that I've called the Village. Now, you would think that after people get divorced, the last thing that you want to do is repeat the cycle, right? You've gone through it, you were in love. Because let's face it, nobody really gets married thinking, you know, this is not going to last. I mean, I don't really know anybody who's done that. Everyone's like, I love them. And now I can't even remember where I was. The girlfriends came. The first thing they all wanted to do was to start dating again. And I had thought, maybe I'm not going to date anymore. I ended up getting caught up in this idea of dating again in middle age. And what I noticed was that there were a lot of patterns. One of the things that happened was some of my friends, they became suddenly Samanthas. I mean, they were like, I haven't had sex for 5 years. I was like, what do you mean? You did that in a parking lot? You're 55. They're like, I haven't had sex for 5 years. I don't care. So that was one thing that happened. Then there's the Cubs. These are younger guys who go after older women. You can read all about it. And then there's the guy who I call he's as old as your father guy. The reality of middle-aged dating, in which a lot of middle-aged men want younger women, can cause some middle-aged women to try to game the odds in their favor by playing the game, i.e. dating a man who is 15, 20, even 25 years older, which means, given the fact that you are now middle-aged yourself, a man who is 70, 75, 80, you wouldn't think that there would be a large contingent of men around that age who are dating. But when you think about demographics and how so many of the boomers are now in their later years, it makes sense that there's a crop of 60, 70, and even 80-something men out there acting like they're 35. I encountered one of these men at a party given by a sensible married couple in their early 60s. There were lots of 50-something single women there like me, and 2 or 3 of these senior age players, or saps. These are older single men of means, meaning they have enough money to add it to their list of attributes and are often still employed in a lesser version of the high-powered career they once had. At some point during the party, I must have talked to one of these men because a few days later, Ron, the host of the party, contacted me to let me know that a fellow named Arnold was interested in taking me out. Ron was very excited about this and impressed. He said Arnold was a big deal, and he really admired the guy. He really admired him. Arnold had played Ivy League football, and, he was once an oil man and a newspaper magnate. Oh, and all the Park Avenue hostesses, they're always inviting him to their parties. He is sought after. I thought I remembered the guy, a tall, thick, battle-axe type who was definitely older. Too old for me, I decided. How old is he, I asked. I think he's a little older than I am, Ron said. 68? These guys often lie about their ages. They fudge, somehow forgetting about that truth-telling device called the internet. Sure enough, when I Googled him, Arnold turned out to be 78. That made him much closer to my father's age than mine. My father was 83. Arnold was just 5 years younger. They couldn't have been more different, though. My father's very conservative. Arnold apparently is not. According to Ron, Arnold used to be somewhat of a notorious wild man who went to Studio 54. Even to this day, Arnold still has much younger girlfriends, the last one being 42. I don't know how he does it, Ron said. I wanted to tell Ron that I didn't want to be the one to find out. And so I tried to say no. Peer pressure, however, is one of the things I hadn't counted on in middle age. And when it came to dating, it turns out there was a lot of it. My friends kept reminding me that it was good to go out, and it was really good that someone had actually asked me out. When was the last time that it happened? Of course, I should go. What's the harm in it? And besides, you never know. Of course, the problem with you never know is that so often you actually do know. I knew, or I was convinced I knew, that I was not going to date a 78-year-old man, no matter how wonderful he was. What if he fell down? I didn't spend my life working this hard to end up taking care of a strange older person. But every time I tried to explain this, I realized how ageist and judgy and anti-love hopeful I sounded. Because I didn't know, did I? I didn't know what was going to happen. What if I fell in love with him? In which case his age wouldn't matter, right? Plus, I didn't want to be that woman. You know, that shallow creature who cares more about practicality than the blind illusions of love. Plus, as Ron reminded me, I must feel so honored that a man as powerful as Arnold wanted to spend time with me. And this is real, okay? In preparation for the date, I went to my friend Sassy's house, and we looked at photographs of Arnold on the internet. His photos went back 30, 35, 40 years. He'd been a big man and rather handsome. Oh, honey, Sassy said, he could turn out to be absolutely wonderful. You must keep an open mind. And so arrangements for a date were negotiated. We could have gone to a restaurant in my town, but Arnold really wanted me to see his house, which was in another town about 30 minutes away. But he would pick me up and take me to see his house, and then we could go to dinner in his town, and then we could go back to his house, and then I could always spend the night at his house if I needed to. And I would need to, because how could I get home, right? And he could drive me back to my house in the morning. A sleepover with a 78-year-old man I didn't know? I don't think so. Thank you.
That was wonderful. The book is filled with laugh out loud moments. There are also some really poignant, tragic moments, the way that you balance this with humor. You are an extremely funny person. When did you know, though, that you had the gift of good humor?
When I was really young.
Yeah?
Yes, I mean, when I was really young, I was always funny, and I always wanted to entertain and be amusing, and I also had a sister who was a year younger. Mm-hmm. And so we were really, really close, and I mean, this was back in the 60s. We weren't allowed to watch TV, so we always had to be doing something constructive. So that consisted of telling stories and writing cartoons. I mean, it really, my sister and I were, I mean, it was, I had to, kids are terribly sarcastic. And my sister and I were those kids. And she would, draw pictures. Like, she could draw a caricature of anybody. And you also have to understand, like, we were really small. And like, we would get, like, bullied a lot. So we had to really fight against boys. And the only way we could do that was, we had this whole shtick. And my sister once made this boy cry, and we were so happy. She made this guy in 5th grade cry, and we were like, yeah. So it came out of that, really, of just observing people and finding the humor, and we were entertaining each other. And, so for me, I mean, the reality is, if I try not to be funny, it's still funny. I mean, it keeps, honestly, it's just the needle keeps going there. And in a way, it's frustrating because if you write things that are funny, it's not, people don't take it seriously. And they don't, and you do, for something to be funny, you do have to, kind of give up a couple of other things. It's a little bit hard to explain, but it's like in terms of like the beats and the way it all comes together to land it's like a piece of music. You can't have certain elements in that thing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, this is a muscle you've been flexing for some time. You've honed it since
and when I was 12, I loved Evelyn Waugh. I loved anything that was about English and aristocrats, and their lives were so glamorous, but also so difficult and kind of empty, and so I was fascinated with like society and Evelyn Waugh, and part of it is because I grew up in a town where like everybody was the same, everybody dressed the same, everybody did the same thing, skied, ate the same food, and you were really, and you couldn't, and you had to really fit in with that thinking and that mindset. And I did not fit in with that mindset at all. And my father was always, you know, he was like, we don't have to please those people, and we don't have to, you know, fit in with them, you know. So that was something that I grew up with. I think everybody feels that way, though.
Has anyone ever made the comparison of you sort of being the Evelyn Waugh for New York in the 90s? Sort of like lifting up the curtain, if you will? Being a fly on the wall and exposing so much of what was going on and the stories you must have or not be able to tell, but please tell us some now. Like, my God, they must be good. No? No one, it's just a few of us here. Go on.
Oh, okay, now you're gonna make me tell this story. I can tell this story because it already was in the New York Times. But I did, back before I started writing Sex and the City, I always wanted a column. Before Sex and the City, I had like another column, but you know, I was doing profiles. And the editor-in-chief of that time was a woman named Susan Morrison, and before that it was Graydon Carter. Graydon Carter's gone to Vanity Fair. Susan Morrison took his place. They were both at Spy. And so they were really, you know, used to doing profiles of, you know, flamboyant or sketchy or mysterious New York characters. You know, everyone's trying to get the dirt on this person. They don't know exactly what the dirt is. And so Jeffrey Epstein's name, along with a few others, were names that she was always like, because she used to call me the Observer's secret weapon, because she felt like I could go out and interview these guys, and I did. And, you know, here's the reality. Like, super powerful men in New York, it would either, I mean, I would say everybody who was like a journalist, like women and men, you would either get a bribe or a threat. I mean, that was just like standard issue. That's how the powerful operated. And, you know, everything's like a trade. So, anyway, and I had kind of heard a couple of things about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I really heard something about private planes and models and passports. So, but it was always like, where does he get his money? And so this was probably it was probably 1993. And I knew somebody who knew him, and this guy was a proper guy. And, you know, he worked on Wall Street, and he was like, I don't want anything tarnishing my reputation. But he was like, I'm friendly with him, and he has cocktail parties. He said, I get you invited to a cocktail party. So I said, great. So I go to the cocktail party, and I'm telling you, it was boring. And, you know, the rooms were kind of hotel-ish. And he came in, and I think he was wearing a T-shirt. He was dressed not appropriately. Everyone's in a suit and tie. And he was literally there for maybe 2 minutes. And then he disappeared. And I said, damn, what am I gonna do? I totally couldn't even get a conversation with the guy. So I was like, I've gotta dig something up. Maybe I can find out something about this private plane. Chances are he keeps it at Teterboro. That's where everybody keeps their private plane. So I go into the kitchen, and I started asking a couple of people who were working there, you know, about the plane. Does he keep it at Teterboro? Yeah, he does. Like, you know, do you remember the tail number? Whoa. And then the door burst open, and a major domo bodyguard type comes in, and he was like, what are you doing? I was like, nothing. Why are you asking questions about the plane? I was like, I don't know. I thought maybe I want a free ride to California sometime. I don't know. He was like, I think you should leave. So I did leave, and then the next day I got a call from my friend, and he was like, fuck, now they think you're writing a story. You can't write a story. And then I got a call from like one of his people, and probably my editor probably got a call too. And this was not unusual, by the way.
Right.
And they basically was like, there's no story, and there's nothing to investigate, and da-da-da. And they just make it clear in a way that if you want to do that story, I mean, I would have to have like, you know, underground, like police contacts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, this is just not the kind of thing that you want to go like stumbling around. Like, these people are not fooling around. So, and then I started writing Sex in the City.
And that was the column, so that was 94 probably,
Yes,
right?
that was 94. So, yeah, so that's a
Wow.
story.
That is a story. Wow. And I'm sure you have many others, but we need to talk about this book.
Yes.
Before,
I'm sorry I banged on for too long.
No, you did not. Don't you dare say that. We are loving it. Now, just to be clear, some of us in this room may know you from as being the author of 9 books. That's extraordinary. Some of us might know you via the television shows that have been adapted from your books. There have been 3 so far. This will be the 4th, as I understand.
Yes.
Yes. Some of us might know you going back to the Observer column, 94 to 97, and some of us might think we know you via your avatar, which some people say your avatar, Carrie Bradshaw.
Right.
So what I want to know is, what is the biggest misconception about Candace?
You know, I don't know. It's hard to say. I do think that people have a certain idea of. I think the biggest misconception is I'm totally down to earth and a real person, and like I know this is a costume, okay? Yeah. You know, I'm not wearing these every day, but I did wear them for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I'm a very down to earth person. I grew up kind of in the country, riding horses. You know, it's dirty. You know, I've been kicked. It's like, I'm like, you know, I'm riding horses in the rain. I mean, I had like a pretty scrappy childhood, so, you know, I have like that side.
You clean up nice.
I clean up nice, yes. I clean up nice. But you know what? It's also, I spend months, like I go out when I have a book coming out, but when I retreated to the country for a couple of years, I had 3 books due.
Wow.
I had contracts for 3 books. And that could make you really, really nervous. And so when I feel that kind of pressure, then I'm like, I have to work. I just have to work. And then I don't go out. And so I have like a whole different side.
And the 3 books that you had to complete, in this book, you mentioned that you pounded out those 3 books, you know, when you left New York, and you had a year, just to recap, you had lost your mother, you had lost your dog, and you had gone through a divorce in a relatively short time.
Yes, and then I couldn't get the mortgage.
Then you couldn't get the mortgage.
On my apartment. Oh, I felt like, you know that cartoon? I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. I was like, I can't get the mortgage.
Because even though you had the assets to get the mortgage, because you were now a single woman?
I was a single woman. I was over 50. And, you know, maybe I would have gotten it if I had worked at the same job for the last 15 years.
Right.
But I literally did not check off any of the boxes. And that, you know, when I didn't get it, I felt so shamed. I mean, I really felt ashamed. I mean, you feel like there's really something wrong with you. And it's the algorithm that's rejecting you. But even so, these things feel really personal. And I felt just like invisible, really. And I was, in a sense.
So in that headspace, you retreat to your teacup house in Connecticut. You pound out 3 books. Your publishers come back and say they're terrible.
Well, they didn't say they were
So
terrible.
that's the autofiction part, excuse me.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't know. Did they say? Oh,
Yeah, this one says like they're terrible. And so I was wondering if that is the Candace, your publisher being like, you pound out these 3 books, and your publishers, let's lighten it then, because I'm sure it was fictionalized. Maybe your publishers weren't ecstatic about them.
Well,
But then
they
you come
were
back and
not,
you write this.
Here's the thing. They were, I had contracts for commercial books, and they want their book on the bestseller list. And there's a formula to those books, and they really want you to check the boxes. And that's actually one of the reasons why they're paying you. They want you to put that book out every 2 years, and they want you to do a variation on what you do and what made it work. And so I feel like with all my books, I always wrote like really what I wanted to, but always trying to write within that framework, because that's part of writing a book. So then I had this editor who said, I promise you, you're going to be able to write, you can write whatever you want to write. If somebody says that to me, I take them seriously. So I was writing this book, and actually my editor loved it. And it was a reimagining. I don't know if you've ever read Joyce Carol Oates' Blonde. She writes about Marilyn Monroe. The way she writes about it, it's like, oh my God. It's like she's channeling something. And if you're a writer and you can get into that like channeling thing, it's like really great. That's really why you do it. So I was like, I'm gonna try that, but I'm gonna do it with like Jennifer Aniston and Angelina Jolie, because I wonder what it's like to be them. So I did all this like research. I tried to find like every fact from their lives, and then I just made it into fiction, and it was just going on forever. Like, they were both still in their 20s, and my agent got really pissed off. And she was like, no. Because the book was it was going on. It was going to be like a 700-page book. Mm-hmm. They didn't want that. So I said, fine. So I'll do a different book. So then I wrote a version of Killing Monica that was super, super surreal. Mm-hmm. And, I loved it, and I thought it made all kinds of sense, and it was like this and that. But they just don't want something that is surreal. Mm-hmm. It's just not.
They want the formula.
Yes. And so I was in big freaking trouble, if you want to know the truth. And they want you to write that commercial book, and I just wasn't, my brain just wasn't there. And that's what's hard about this. It's like,
you're on a timeline to get your brain there.
Yeah, but I don't want my brain to be that formulaic. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to do that. I think it's really about taking a risk. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it's about. And the great thing about it is I spent so much time writing, and writing is really, it's like playing an instrument. Mm-hmm. You are exercising a certain part of your brain, and the more you do it, it's like I could write an outline for a Broadway musical. Like, I do that for fun. You know what I'm saying? If I'm just like writing. So the more you do it, it's like the more you can get in that flow. And if I stop doing it, and then I try to do it again. Like, I haven't written anything for, 4 months. Mm-hmm. If I try to do it, I'm like, I'd be better off being a plumber. I will have like no clue. I won't be able to write a sentence. Mm-hmm. I will just be like, are you kidding? Mm-hmm. Like, you need another job. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel.
It's not necessarily like riding a bike. You need to keep that muscle moving all
You
the time.
have to keep that muscle moving, yes.
How do you think your writing has evolved since the column for The Observer in the 90s to today?
You know, I think the way one's writing evolves is it just becomes, I think, more and more you, and it feels like it becomes more, in a sense, like digestible. I don't know, but the reality is when I look at things that I wrote when I was 20, they're pretty similar.
Really? That's great.
Yes, I mean, it's really dark, and it's really dark.
Do you ever, how do I say this? It's hard to admit maybe that you, not foreshadowed, but that you're a harbinger of certain things. When I think about when your column came out and then subsequently the little television show called Sex and the City that followed it, at that time, you've always called yourself a feminist since you were little. I've read that. And all of your friends did too in the 80s. But in the 90s, 97, 98, when the show was coming out, that was that time in history when feminism, for a blip, maybe even longer actually, became a bad word.
Well, see, I actually think, to me, like, Sex and the City is so feminist because it's really, I mean, it is in the book, and I think it is in the first 2 seasons. And because it really is about, hey, you know what, society? We are single women in our 30s, and guess what? We're getting on with it. We've got our friends. We've made a different kind of family, and we are not pariahs. We are not freaks. You know, there isn't something wrong with us because we don't want to follow the narrow, prescriptive life of what society tells women they can and should do and all of that. So this was like, to me, this was feminism in action. Here were these women who were independent and earning their own living and making their own money. And when women can make their own money, guess what happens? They don't need to put up with that male stuff that they have been putting up with for years. And you see a lot of women who choose not to have to do that lifestyle of, you know, if you're a heterosexual, you are really pushed into that heterosexual relationship. And you know what? Heterosexual relationships are historically not that great for women. Okay? So, and then what I feel happened, I know, and I love saying that, because it's true. And then what happened is, you know, so much of this is tied to the economy. And I know somebody's like laughing about that. Like, I can't believe the Carrie Bradshaw, who couldn't figure out she paid too much money for shoes and now she can't pay her mortgage. She can't have a loan. It's like, that's not me, okay? But the economy in New York was very bad. It didn't recover the way it did in the rest of the country in the 90s. And it started to recover in like 1998 and into 2000. Now, meanwhile, the economy had recovered in other parts of the country. And those were the parts of and because of the internet, there was suddenly luxury brands that were available only to people who lived in cities where those luxury brands were sold, like New York, Milan, London. Because of the internet and the explosion of information, suddenly those brands are everywhere. And suddenly, if you notice, everybody wants fur, and everybody wants designer, and this thing happens in the air where when the economy is good, women are not calling themselves feminists because the feeling is that, you know, they can align themselves with a man who's making money. And being a feminist is really the opposite of that. So if you notice, there are shows like Bridezillas were flourishing, and shows where women were encouraged to spend all this money on your wedding. Go into debt, become a bridezilla. Ask that guy to give you a 3-carat diamond ring because you deserve it. And that was a huge commercialization of romance. And the show was on the air, and the show captured that zeitgeist as well. And, you know, that really was the zeitgeist at the time. It was a non-feminist time.
Yeah, it was, but I feel like your column and your books were fiercely feminist, and it also did something. There's certainly before your books and before the television series, female friendship has certainly been portrayed, but the way you portray female friendship, warts and all, I feel was something that was ahead of its curve. So the feminist sort of aspect of your writing and the highlighting of female friendship, do you feel, can you say to us just in front of your close friends here that you were ahead of the curve a bit, that you...
Well, you know what, it was my life. And the other thing that you have to remember is I worked at women's magazines, and I worked in publishing from a very young age. And the one thing that we were taught, always be ahead of the curve. Because if you work at a women's magazine, if you work at any kind of publication, you have to be ahead of things and on top of things, because that publication is going to come out 6 months from when you wrote that piece. So that was a muscle that I really developed, of like always going out there and getting information and trying to see like what's going on, talking to people a lot, and just trying to get like the, you know, the flavor, the zeitgeist. So it is something that I pay attention to and I'm conscious of. And I mean, even now, I keep thinking about, you know, things like, I mean, Instagram, and how are we going to use it in the future, and technology, and, you know, I mean, like 20 years from now is so far ahead in technology. And you know, I'm really wonder, like, how is that going to affect our mating and dating rituals? I mean, will we even need to have like a heterosexual setup to raise a family? I don't know. And I know some people are like, that's horrible. I know, but it's, you know, technology makes us a little bit more solitary as well, but that's okay too, probably. So these are all things that, you know, I'm thinking about, and I'm wondering, like, what is it going to be? So I do think about it,
and you experience as well. I mean,
and
you joined Tinder.
Yes, well, you know what?
This.
It's I guess it would be method journalism.
Yes.
Where you go and you do the thing. And that was, when I was young, I realized I can make money this way, set myself up as a guinea pig. Now, from an early age, I don't know if I should tell this story. I was 19, I moved to New York, and I was like, I'm gonna be a writer. And in those days, there were lots of newspapers, and they had ads. And so people were always looking for editorial assistants or assistant writer or something like that. So I went for this interview. They didn't say where it was, but it paid $250 a week. That was a fortune. So, and it was a publication. I went, and the elevator doors open, and there's a podium. It's this tall, and behind it are these two perfectly matched, gorgeous women. I'm like, what the hell? I'm in the office as a penthouse. So then I have a meeting with these two guys, and they're like, and I'd probably given them some sample writing. They're like, yeah, we really want you to write for Penthouse. And I'm like, great, I think. And they're like, okay. So this is what we want you to do. We want you to go and have sex with another woman and write about it. And I was like, I can't. I'm like, I can't. I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't do it. So then I went and got a job at Good Housekeeping.
That's wonderful. This is going by incredibly fast. We want to get to questions to the audience, so I got just 2 more for you. You write that talking about money is still dirtier than talking about sex, which I completely agree with. And women continue to fight for equal pay and value today. And I feel like young women, people like Elaine Welteroth, who is the former editor-in-chief there of Teen Vogue, which and turned that whole thing around and is a powerhouse. She's advocating for women having these conversations and so on publicly.
Yes.
How do you advocate today for your worth?
What do you mean? Like,
How do you, like, is this
do
something
I
that
go and demand people give me money or?
Yeah, sure. Like, do you feel like you look at you, you know who you are, we know who you are. Is this something that you are still afraid? I'm not asking you to tell us how much money you make,
Right.
But is this something that you still feel you're battling?
Yes, I do. But part of it is, you have to think, how much time do you want to spend? I mean, for me, I want to put my creative energy, I want to put my energies into creating. Mm-hmm. People who make a lot of money, they are thinking about money, they are breathing money. As this friend of mine said, the people who are closest to the actual money are the richest. And she's right. It's like people who are, it's like, those are the people who make the most money. And you meet a lot of people in Hollywood who they are keeping score by how much money they have, how much, and the deals go to people they know, and, men enhance the pockets of other men. And I mean, I feel like I could write a whole flow chart of like the billionaire man, and then how it goes down. Like the billionaire man, and then he's got like a trusted advisor who's worth like $750 million. And then, there's another guy. So they all are somehow attached to this money stream, but it just goes to like here, and then it doesn't go any farther. That's these guys. And, it's, the contracts are so complicated and convoluted, and it's such a, I have friends who've worked in the TV business where, they had a hit and they had to spend 6 years, quote, suing to get their money.
Right.
With like lawyers and, there are a lot of, it's in the contract, but you're not going to get that money unless you get lawyers and stuff. So they really design it so that if you want to get your money, you have to pay other people too. That's how this business works with, everyone's got their hand out. In order to get anything done, you got to pay all these people. Mm-hmm. And it's, it could just be a whole job. Mm-hmm. So I am just like,
you're content being the creator.
Yes, and I'm like, it's like how I live is how I live. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't have a big house, and it's like a dream to have a big house, but you can only be in one freaking room at a time. Okay?
Sorry.
So
that is
really,
an excellent point.
Like, does it really matter? No.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
One room. This is an excellent point. Okay, 60 seconds on the clock. I really like ending things on a serious note, so I'm going to ask you as many questions as I can, and you just have to answer them as honestly as you can. Here we go. How many pairs of Manolo Blahniks do you own?
100.
Have you ever had sex on the beach?
Oh, yeah.
Morning sex or nighttime sex? Wow. Morning sex or nighttime sex? Which do you prefer?
Both.
Amazing. Favorite TV show right now?
Married at First Sight.
Okay, what's the last movie you watched?
Oh God, it's gonna be a screener. I can't remember.
A screener. Next one. Last thing you splurged on.
No, I got these for free. A piece of clothing.
Incredible. What's the new Cosmopolitan cocktail?
It's Cosmopolitan with champagne. I just made that up.
Oh my gosh. Now we know. Thank you. Join me at the bar afterwards, and I'll find those ingredients. We'll put them together. Do you know the game F, Marry, Kill? No. F stands for F-U-C-K. You can.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're gonna go F, Marry, Kill with Sex and the City characters. Here we go. First one: Smith Jared, Steve Brady, Harry Goldenblatt. Who do you F? Who do you marry? Who do you kill?
You know what? I can't answer that. Because right now, I'd take any one of them.
And thank you for that. Wow.
Thank you.